This number matters. Your bone density score is one of the strongest predictors of fracture risk, but it doesn't tell the whole story because two people with the same bone density can have completely different chances of breaking a hip. See, what does the DEXA scan or your bone density test really measure? Well, let's look at the full name. It's called bone mineral density. In other words, it measures the mineral content of the bones. However, minerals only make up about 40% of your bone mass. So what about the other 60% that isn't minerals or aren't minerals? Well, that's not measured by bone mineral density scan. So here are other factors that go into fracture risk besides bone density. Bone geometry. So that's the interlinking of different bone cells to each other. So you might have a low bone density and a good bone geometry, or you might have low bone density and poor bone geometry, poor interconnections. Also, a DEXA scan doesn't measure your balance. So bone density tells you how likely are you to break a bone if you were to fall or to have some kind of collision, but it doesn't tell you your likelihood of falling in the first place. That's determined by balance testing. Also, another factor that goes into fracture risk besides bone density is your muscle strength. It also doesn't measure your reaction time. In other words, if you start to fall, do you react quickly to get your foot back on track to rebalance your equilibrium, or is there a delayed reaction, and by which point it's too late? Also, it doesn't measure your fall mechanics. How you fall is as important as whether you fall. In other words, if you're falling and you have proper mechanics, you roll out of it quickly, you transfer force, etc. You have fall training or fall specific training, you're much less likely to fracture hip even with low bone density. And so why do most fractures happen? Very, very simple. First of all, it's a combination of poor balance as well as weak hips and slow reactions. Basically, if the muscles are too weak to pull on bones, bones don't get stronger, they get weaker. And that's how you lose bone density. So let's look at one example of two people, of both of whom have the same T-score. One person with a low T-score has good balance and good muscle strength. The second person with the exact same T-score has poor balance and low muscle strength. Person 2 has a higher fractures than person 1, even if their bone density is the same. So if there's more to fractures than just your bone density or your DEXA score, why do doctors over-focus on DEXA? There are a number of different reasons. First of all, it's easy. It's just a simple number. It's you have normal bone density, osteopenia, or osteoporosis. Second of all, insurance covers medications as well as treatments based on DEXA scores, not based on muscle strength, not based on balance assessments, but on DEXA scores. Another reason is there are drug thresholds. In other words, if you meet certain criteria based on DEXA scores, you get to be prescribed drugs, certain medications that are appropriate for osteoporosis. Um, Also, it's hard to measure muscle strength in a doctor's office. That's something you do in a gym or a lab. And so here is what I call the five-factor model of fracture risk. Yes, bone density is one of those. It's a very important one, but it's not the only one. Another one is muscle strength. A third one is your balance. A fourth one is your reaction time. And a fifth one is your fall mechanics. And so how does proper exercise change these? Exercise affects all of them. It improves bone density. Of course, it improves muscle strength. If you do proper balance training, it improves your balance and reaction time. So it affects all of the factors that go into fracture risk reduction. And so why don't walking and yoga reduce fractures? A number of different reasons. First of all, they don't train balance directly. They don't really improve balance all that much. Certainly better than sitting on your couch, but not as good as direct balance training. Also, they don't strengthen bones because there is no progressive bone stimulus and no fall specific training. Okay. Additionally, they don't actually target the muscles where you have the lowest T scores. Think of it like this. Bones only get strong at the spot where the muscles pull on those bones. In other words, there's no systemic effect of exercise on bones. There's only very specific effects. So you have to specifically train the muscles that connect to the bones where you have the lowest T scores. So if you have osteoporosis and you lift the same weights all the time, you still have osteoporosis. You will have maintained your bone density. which is better than losing more bone density, but that's not a good thing. You already have low bone density and you maintain it. It's better to have higher bone density. So if you have osteoporosis or osteopenia and you lift progressively heavier weights, your bones will have a reason to get stronger, and so they do. They remineralize and bone density improves. Also, strength training, again, in a progressive way reduces fracture risk, as does balance training in a way that carries over to your real life. My name is Igor. I help adults over 50 improve bone density without medications. And if you want to dive way deeper into this, I have a special video titled The Stronger Bones Checklist: 6 Steps to Improve Bone Density Naturally. It covers exercise and nutrition to strengthen bones. Now, this video is not available on YouTube, but it is available for free to people who watch this video at this link on your screen right now or in the description below.